March 4, 2023. What began as a routine sentencing hearing inside Benton County's modest courthouse would soon escalate into a moment of national attention. A single act of desperation, chaotic, sudden, and caught on multiple angles of surveillance, would bring months of trauma, mistrust, and emotional decay into a violent crescendo. It began at 9:03 a.m. Courtroom 4B. The room was filled with quiet tension. Robert Dean Carter sat stiffly between his attorney and a court officer. Behind him, a gallery of observers, some media, some family, some just local residents, watched as the judge prepared to deliver sentencing. Carter had been convicted of aggravated assault, criminal trespass, and violating a protection order, charges that stemmed from a disturbing confrontation just 4 months earlier. But for Carter, the courtroom wasn't a place of justice. It was a prison of misunderstanding, trauma, and loss, beginning with the death of his older brother, Marcus, during a police raid in 2021. The judge's voice echoed through the room. Then came the sentence, 15 years in state prison. In less than 3 seconds, Carter made his move. Surveillance footage later confirmed it. He rose abruptly, sending his metal chair clattering to the floor. Panic spread across the room. Court officers shouted commands. Carter lunged, not toward the judge, not toward the exit, but toward the public gallery. Toward Lila Grant. She flinched before the first officer intercepted him. A court bailiff tackled Carter mid-stride, but he thrashed violently. A taser discharged. Screams rose. A clerk cried out. Another fainted. The chaos lasted no more than 25 seconds. But in that half-minute, the courtroom became a battleground of memory and mistrust. To understand what happened that day, one must rewind months earlier. November 8, 2022. A 911 call was placed from a small apartment complex on Oak Street. The caller, later identified as Lila Grant, spoke in hushed, panicked tones. She told dispatchers that Carter had returned. That he was standing outside her door. That he was armed. She referenced a restraining order. She mentioned something about his brother. Something about finishing what had been started. Police were dispatched. Bodycam footage shows officers approaching the complex in the early morning dark, flashlights cutting through the cold November air. When they arrived, Carter was nowhere in sight. He was found crouched behind a trash receptacle, muttering to himself, the phrase repeated over and over, "It wasn't supposed to be like this." This would become the cornerstone of the prosecution's case. That Carter's psychological deterioration, his obsession with retribution, and his refusal to honor the restraining order constituted a clear and present danger. But there was more. Audio evidence obtained from Lila's earlier interactions with Carter painted a picture that was anything but black and white. In one such recording, made weeks before the November incident, Carter could be heard crying, pleading, then shouting incoherently. The tone shifted from heartbreak to rage within minutes. Forensic audio analysts would later testify that Carter was in a severely dissociative state during those calls. But the jury would never hear that. Instead, they were presented with Lila's revised testimony. She had originally claimed Carter threatened her with a knife. That he forced her to remain inside while he ranted about his brother's death. Later, under pressure from the defense, she amended her statement admitting that she never saw the weapon, only assumed it. The prosecutors forged ahead, citing a pattern of behavior, escalating paranoia, and Carter's repeated violations of the protective order. They introduced cell tower data, linking Carter's phone to the apartment building on at least 4 occasions after the restraining order was issued. But there were cracks. At trial, Carter's defense centered on mental health. They brought forward documentation of PTSD, untreated depressive episodes, and testimony from a forensic psychiatrist who claimed Carter had been living in a state of prolonged trauma since his brother's death. Marcus Carter had been killed during a botched narcotics raid. The family insisted Marcus wasn't involved in dealing, but was instead in the wrong place at the wrong time. The department maintained otherwise. Robert never recovered. The defense argued that Carter wasn't lashing out violently, but unraveling. That he was fixated on justice for Marcus, and unable to differentiate between betrayal and survival. The prosecution responded with cold evidence. 911 transcripts. Broken windows. Damaged property. The violated court orders. In the end, the jury returned a guilty verdict on all major counts. Sentencing was scheduled for March 4th. That morning, Carter arrived in court in shackles. He wore a navy jumpsuit, and his eyes darted constantly toward the gallery, toward Lila, toward the doors. When the sentence was read, the moment ruptured. Some believe he tried to flee. Others think he was reaching for Lila to intimidate, to beg, to ask why she changed her story. Whatever his motive, the courtroom turned into chaos. Multiple angles captured the scene. A court security camera. 2 officer body cams. 1 local news photographer, whose lens caught the instant Carter leapt forward. The footage went viral. By that afternoon, the courthouse released a statement. Charges were added: attempted escape, resisting arrest, assault on a court officer. Behind the headlines was a larger question: who failed whom? In the weeks following the courtroom incident, investigators reopened elements of the Marcus Carter shooting. Internal memos revealed that Marcus was not listed as a primary suspect in the narcotics operation. His name appeared only once in a footnote, labeled as possible associate. There was no conclusive evidence he sold or used drugs. But he was there. And when the door came down, and flashbangs filled the room, Marcus was struck twice by officers. No body cam footage survived from that night. 2 officers' cams were reportedly deactivated due to malfunction. For Robert Carter, that became the seed. The rage, the suspicion, the obsession. In an official post-sentencing statement, Lila said she felt conflicted. That she believed Carter was both victim and aggressor. That she feared him, but also feared what made him who he became. Months after the courtroom chaos, Carter's legal team appealed the sentencing on the grounds of inadequate mental health intervention. A psychiatric evaluation conducted in May 2023 diagnosed Carter with complex PTSD, dissociative tendencies, and prolonged grief disorder. The state rejected the appeal. Robert Dean Carter now serves a 20-year sentence at Halverson Correctional Facility. His record notes 1 major infraction: attempted escape. A guard report attached to the file reads simply: subject burst into tears and refused to speak for 36 hours. Lila Grant has since relocated out of state. In her final interview before disappearing from the public eye, she said, "Sometimes I lock my doors 3 times. Sometimes I hear his voice in my sleep. But the worst part? Part of me wonders if he was just trying to be heard." Courtroom 4B has since resumed normal operations. The gallery benches have been replaced. The bailiff who tackled Carter now teaches de-escalation tactics to new officers. But for those who witnessed it, the moment lingers. A routine sentencing. A man unraveling. And a courtroom thrown into chaos by a story far more complicated than any verdict could contain. Thanks for watching Deep Case. Please do not forget to like and subscribe.